Commander Valk adjusted his 4 eyes for the 3rd time this morning, each pupil dilating independently as he stared at the datapad in his 6-fingered hands. The prestigious Galactic Military Academy buzzed with its usual pre-test energy, but today felt different. Today felt stupid. Nira, he called to his assistant, a slender Cathari whose scales shifted from blue to nervous purple. Remind me again why we're allowing a Deathworlder to attempt the survival maze? Nira's tail twitched as she consulted her own device. Exchange program protocols, sir. The Human Federation insisted their cadet participate in all standard evaluations. No exceptions, no modifications. Right, of course. Valk's mandibles clicked in what passed for a sigh among his species, because the humans think they're so special. Through the reinforced observation windows, they could see the infamous survival maze sprawling across 3 levels below them. 30 years of military engineering had gone into that beautiful, terrifying structure. The galaxy's finest tactical minds had designed every corridor, every trap, every psychological pressure point. It was a masterpiece of controlled chaos, designed to test a cadet's ability to think under pressure, adapt to impossible situations, and work within established protocols. The record completion time? 25 minutes and 43 seconds, held by a Zephyrian whose species was literally bred for problem-solving. Most cadets took the full 30 minutes and still failed. Some needed medical attention afterward. A few had nervous breakdowns and switched to accounting. Sir Nira's voice carried that particular tone that meant she was about to deliver news he wouldn't like. The human cadet has arrived. Valk turned to see Mika Torres walking across the prep area below. She looked ordinary. Disgustingly ordinary. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, no natural weapons, no enhanced sensory organs, no telepathic abilities. Just a bipedal mammal in standard issue academy fatigues, stretching her shoulders like she was preparing for a morning jog. That's her? Valk couldn't hide his skepticism. That's the terrifying Deathworlder we've all heard so much about? Apparently so, sir. Other cadets gave Mika a wide berth as she performed what looked like random body movements. Stretching, they called it. The Rigelian cadets whispered among themselves, their translator units working overtime. The Centauri delegation looked openly amused. Even the usually stoic Andromedan representatives seemed to be sharing what passed for jokes in their mechanical language. Look at them, Valk gestured with 2 of his arms. They all think she's insane for volunteering. And honestly, I'm starting to agree. The survival maze wasn't just difficult, it was designed to be nearly impossible. Multiple escape routes existed, but each required different skills, different approaches, different ways of thinking. The maze adapted to each species' strengths and exploited their weaknesses. It learned. It evolved. It had never been beaten by brute force alone. The betting pools are quite active, sir, Nira mentioned casually. Current odds have her lasting maybe 12 minutes before requesting extraction. 12 minutes? Valk's laugh sounded like grinding gears. Someone's being generous. I give her 8 before she realizes this isn't whatever primitive training humans call challenging. Below them, Mika finished her stretching routine and approached the maze entrance. She paused at the briefing station, where a holographic instructor began explaining the rules, the safety protocols, the emergency extraction procedures. Standard stuff. Boring stuff. Necessary stuff. Mika nodded politely through the whole presentation, asked 0 questions, and signed the liability waivers with the kind of casual confidence that should have been their first warning. 30 minutes, the holographic instructor announced. Multiple solutions available. Use your training, trust your instincts, and remember that requesting extraction is not failure, it's strategic thinking. Mika Torres looked directly up at the observation deck, somehow finding Valk's position among the dozens of watching eyes, and smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a confident smile. Something else entirely. Something that made Valk's scales itch. Timer starts now. The moment Mika Torres stepped into the maze, the observation deck transformed into something resembling a sports arena. Valk watched in mild disgust as various alien species produced their equivalent of snacks. The Rigelians had their fermented nutrient pods, the Centauri delegation munched on crystallized gas clouds, and the Andromedans, well, they didn't eat, but they did emit satisfied mechanical humming sounds. "This should be entertaining," muttered Zara Kelix, the Zephyrian tactical instructor, her silver skin shimmering with amusement. Watch her hit the first laser grid and panic. The first challenge appeared right on schedule, a corridor filled with intersecting laser beams that moved in complex patterns. Standard protocol dictated careful observation, timing analysis, and methodical navigation. The approved solution took most cadets 3 to 4 minutes of careful study. Mika looked at the lasers for exactly 2 seconds. Then she grabbed a broken piece of wall paneling that had been artfully placed as environmental debris and used it as a shield, simply walking through the entire grid while deflecting the beams. "Wait," said Thane Korvac, a draconian combat specialist whose scales had just shifted to confused orange. "That's not she can't just." "She can't just what?" Valk asked, though his own mandibles were starting to twitch nervously. "She's treating the debris as equipment," Korvac explained, sounding personally offended. "That's meant to be environmental storytelling, not a solution." On the screens, Mika had already reached the puzzle lock chamber. This was where cadets typically spent 8 to 10 minutes solving a complex mathematical equation that required understanding of quantum mechanics, temporal physics, and interdimensional calculus. Mika examined the lock for 30 seconds, then simply ripped the entire mechanism out of the wall. The door opened anyway. How did she? Nira's voice trailed off as she consulted her technical manuals. The backup systems weren't supposed to activate unless the primary lock was completely destroyed, finished Eric Voss, the human military liaison who had somehow appeared beside them without invitation. She probably figured the engineers would build in redundancy. "That's cheating," declared Korvac flatly. "No," Voss replied with a grin that showed entirely too many teeth. "That's thinking." The gravity well chamber was next, designed to test a cadet's ability to adapt to rapidly changing environmental conditions. Most species struggled with the shifting gravitational fields, requiring careful navigation and precise timing. Mika took one look at the gravity manipulators, found their power source, and simply turned them off. She turned them off. Zara's voice had climbed several octaves. "You can't just turn off the obstacles." "Why not?" Boss asked innocently. "Rules say she has to escape the maze. They don't say she has to leave the obstacles functional." By the time they reached the holographic enemy encounter, Valk was seriously reconsidering his career choices. The simulation was supposed to test combat awareness, tactical thinking, and resource management. Elite programming created adaptive AI opponents that responded to each cadet's fighting style. Mika walked straight through the holograms. "They're not real," she said loudly enough for the audio pickups to catch. "Why waste time fighting fake enemies?" "Because," Korvac sputtered, "the simulation is designed to test your—" "4 minutes," Nira interrupted, her voice deadly quiet. "Commander, it's been 4 minutes, and she's already at level 5. The observation deck fell silent except for the gentle humming of life support systems and the distant sound of Valk's worldview crumbling. Level 5 was supposed to be unreachable in under 15 minutes. The Maisie's own adaptive systems were supposed to prevent such rapid progress. Years of careful psychological profiling had gone into creating challenges that would slow down any species they'd encountered. "Sir," Nira continued, consulting her instruments with growing panic, "the Maisie's learning algorithms are sending error reports. They can't categorize her approach to, well, anything." "What do you mean?" Valk asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "She's not following any recognized tactical doctrine, not human, not alien, not anything in our databases. She's just making it up as she goes along." On the screens, Mika had reached the environmental hazard section, where toxic gas clouds were supposed to force careful route planning and resource management. She held her breath and ran straight through. How long can humans hold their breath? Zara asked weakly. Longer than you'd think, Voss replied cheerfully, especially when they're motivated. This is insane, Korvac declared, his scales now a deep purple that indicated severe stress. She's not solving the challenges, she's just ignoring them. That's the point, Voss said, his grin widening. You built a maze to test problem solving. She's solving the problems, just not the way you expected. Valk stared at the screens, watching Mika Torres systematically dismantle 30 years of military engineering through the simple expedient of refusing to acknowledge that things were supposed to be difficult. Nira, he said quietly, how many more levels are there? 12, sir. And how much time has passed? 4 minutes and 37 seconds, sir. Valk's mandibles clicked rapidly, a nervous habit he'd developed during the War of the Spinning Nebulae. At this rate. She'll finish in under 10 minutes, sir. The observation deck had gone completely silent now, except for the soft sound of Voss chuckling and the increasingly frantic beeping of the maze's monitoring systems. Someone, Valk said slowly, please tell me the final chamber will stop her. Nobody answered. Level 6 presented the climbing challenge that had broken more cadets than any other obstacle in the maze's history. A sheer vertical wall stretched 40 meters high, equipped with handholds that randomly retracted, surfaces that shifted between friction and frictionless states, and gravity fields that pulled in different directions at different heights. The wall was designed by Andromedans, built by draconian engineers, and reinforced with Zephyrian quantum-locked materials. It was, by any reasonable definition, unbreakable. Mika took one look at it, walked around to the side, and started examining the wall's structural supports. What is she doing? Zara whispered, her silver skin now pale with anxiety. She's looking for weak points, Voss explained, still annoyingly cheerful. Standard human approach. If you can't go over something, go around it. If you can't go around it, go through it. Through it? Korvac's scales had progressed from purple to an alarming shade of black. That wall is made of compressed neutronium alloy. Nothing goes through it. On the screen, Mika had found what she was looking for, a maintenance access panel near the base of the wall. She pried it open with the broken laser grid deflector she'd been carrying and started pulling out components. Oh no, breathed Nira, consulting her technical manuals frantically. Those are primary structural stabilizers. If she removes too many. Mika removed 6. The wall didn't collapse, but it started making very unhappy groaning sounds. This is fascinating. Mika's voice came through the audio pickups as she talked to herself. They built it strong, but they built it rigid. No flexibility engineering. Very pretty, very impressive, very impractical. She wedged the laser deflector into a gap she'd created and started using it as a lever. Humans learned a long time ago that flexible beats strong every time. She's giving herself an engineering lecture while destroying priceless military architecture, Valk observed, his voice climbing toward hysteria. This is fine. This is totally normal behavior. The wall developed a crack. Mika inserted more salvaged components into the crack and started widening it systematically, humming what sounded like a human work song. 6 minutes, Nira reported, her voice barely a whisper. She's been in there 6 minutes and she's about to? The wall didn't collapse so much as it folded in on itself, creating a perfectly Mika-sized opening that she walked through while brushing dust off her uniform. That was load-bearing, Korvac shouted, pointing at the screens. That wall was supporting the entire upper section. Not anymore, Voss observed helpfully. Level 7 featured the infamous acid trap corridor, where cadets had to navigate pools of corrosive liquid while being attacked by robotic drones and solving riddles broadcast in 17 different languages simultaneously. The acid was real, the drones were lethal, and the riddles were designed by the galaxy's most sadistic philosophers. Mika looked at the acid, looked at the drones, looked at the speakers broadcasting the riddles, and started laughing. She's having a breakdown, Zara said hopefully. The pressure finally got to her. No, Voss replied, grinning wider. She's figured out the joke. Mika grabbed a handful of the dissolved wall material from level 6 and threw it at the acid pools. The neutralization reaction was immediate and violent, filling the corridor with harmless foam. Alkaline building materials, she announced cheerfully. Someone didn't think about basic chemistry when they designed this. She waved at the drones which were now flying around aimlessly in the foam, and sound-dampening foam means no more riddles. 2 problems, 1 solution. That's not how you're supposed to solve it. Korvac was now vibrating with rage. The approved method involves careful navigation, tactical drone elimination, and linguistic analysis. Too slow, Mika called back, somehow knowing she was being monitored. I've got places to be. Level 8, the pressure chamber. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species, designed to test environmental suit management and emergency protocols. Mika sealed the chamber entrance behind her, found the pressure controls, and simply equalized everything to standard atmospheric levels. She's rewriting the test parameters, Nira said in a voice of pure horror. She's not taking the test, she's editing it. Level 9, the temporal maze, where time moved at different speeds in different corridors, requiring complex calculations to navigate efficiently. Mika found the temporal generators and turned them off too. Why does everything have an off switch? Valk asked the universe in general. Because, Voss explained patiently, good engineering includes maintenance access. Humans are very good at finding maintenance access. Level 10, the psychological evaluation chamber, where cadets faced their deepest fears in holographic form while solving puzzles under extreme stress. Mika walked in, looked around at the nightmarish projections of human phobias, and started critiquing the special effects. The spiders are pretty good, she admitted, but the lighting is all wrong for proper horror ambience. And that's not how human blood actually looks when it coagulates. Did you guys just watch movies for research? The psychological evaluation AI had what could only be described as a nervous breakdown and shut itself down. 7 minutes, Nira whispered. 7 minutes, and she's at level 11. What's level 11? Valk asked, though he was beginning to understand that the question itself was meaningless. The combat gauntlet. Automated weapon systems, tactical scenarios, live ammunition. On the screens, Mika had reached a corridor filled with pulse cannons, plasma turrets, and kinetic barriers. Weapons that could cut through ship hulls were tracking her movement, preparing to test her combat abilities with potentially lethal precision. Mika found the central control system and simply unplugged it. All the weapons powered down simultaneously. She unplugged it, Korvac said in a small voice. She just unplugged the combat gauntlet. Excellent cable management, though, Mika commented, examining the wiring. Very neat, very organized, totally impractical for combat scenarios, but aesthetically pleasing. The observation deck was now completely silent except for the sound of Valk's career aspirations dying quietly in the corner. Sir, Nira said, consulting her instruments with the dedication of someone clinging to the last fragments of sanity, there's only 1 level left. The final chamber, Valk said numbly. The diplomatic simulation. Surely she can't just unplug diplomacy. Boss was now laughing openly. Oh, Commander, he said, wiping tears from his eyes, you really don't understand humans at all, do you? 8 minutes, Nira announced. She's been in there 8 minutes and she's about to reach a chamber that's supposed to take most cadets 45 minutes to complete. Mika Torres had just treated their Galaxy-class military evaluation like a casual morning jog with mildly annoying obstacles. And she was still accelerating. The final chamber represented the pinnacle of Galactic Military Academy testing philosophy. A sophisticated diplomatic simulation where cadets faced a complex multi-species negotiation scenario involving trade disputes, territorial claims, and cultural misunderstandings. The AI systems were programmed with the psychological profiles of 47 different alien species, complete with historical grudges, economic pressures, and social taboos. Most cadets spent an hour just reading the briefing materials. The record completion time was 45 minutes, achieved by a Centauri diplomat who later became an ambassador to 12 star systems. Mika walked into the chamber, looked at the holographic conference table surrounded by AI representations of various alien dignitaries, and immediately started examining the control panels. "Welcome, Cadet Torres," announced the diplomatic AI in a voice designed to convey authority and gravitas. "You are about to mediate a critical negotiation between the hegemony of—" "Aha," Mika replied, not looking up from the control panel she'd opened with a safety pin she'd somehow acquired. "That's nice." The complexity of this scenario requires careful analysis of cultural dynamics, economic factors, and— Mika stuck a piece of chewing gum onto one of the circuits. The diplomatic AI stuttered, processed for a moment, and then began speaking in monotone. All parties agreed to immediate peaceful resolution. Negotiation complete. Have a nice day. Wait, what? Zara's voice cracked. She hacked the diplomatic AI with gum? The conductive properties, Voss explained, now openly recording the whole thing on his personal device. Probably created a feedback loop in the decision matrix. That's not how diplomacy works. Korvac wailed. It is if you're in a hurry, Mika replied cheerfully. She walked toward what should have been the exit, the gleaming portal that would mark her completion of the maze and return her to the starting area in triumph. The door was locked. Congratulations, announced the maze's central AI. You have completed all challenges. However, final psychological evaluation requires you to demonstrate patience and reflection. Please remain in the chamber for 15 minutes of mandatory decompression time. Mika stared at the locked door for exactly 3 seconds. Nope, she said. Oh no, Nira whispered, suddenly understanding what was about to happen. The exit protocol is hardwired into the safety systems. It can't be overridden without. Mika was already examining the chamber walls, tapping them with her knuckles and listening to the resonance patterns. Reinforced neutronium composite, she mused, talking to herself again. Same stuff as the climbing wall, but thicker. Probably 40 centimeters of it. She started pulling components out of her pockets, pieces of the laser grid, chunks of wall material, broken circuit boards, and what looked like half a temporal generator. But everything has a resonance frequency. She's not going to Korvac started. She absolutely is, Voss confirmed, his grin threatening to split his face in half. Structural integrity alert, blared the Academy's emergency systems as Mika began assembling what could only be described as an improvised demolition device. Unauthorized construction detected in maze level 12. Sir. 3 different engineering technicians burst into the observation deck simultaneously. She's building something that registers as a Class 4 explosive device. How? Valk demanded. She doesn't have any explosives. She doesn't need them, one of the engineers replied, consulting his scanner frantically. But she's using the temporal generator fragments to create a localized time dilation field, the laser components to focus energy resonance, and the building materials to create a shaped charge that will amplify the— In simple terms, Valk shouted. She's turning physics into a weapon, sir. Down in the chamber, Mika had finished her construction project and was backing away from the wall while checking her chronometer. You know, she called out loudly, someone really should have mentioned that alien architecture prioritizes beauty over structural engineering. Very aesthetic, very impressive, completely impractical for actual stress loads. Evacuation protocols initiated. The emergency systems announced. All personnel clear the testing area. She's not actually going to. Zara began. Mika activated her device. The wall didn't just break. It didn't crack, crumble, or collapse with dignity. It completely disintegrated. One moment there was 40 centimeters of the galaxy's strongest building material. The next moment there was a perfectly circular hole 3 meters wide leading directly to the Academy's main corridor, with edges so clean they looked like they'd been cut with a precision laser. Smoke poured out of the chamber. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Structural alarms screamed warnings about compromised integrity zones. And through it all, Mika Torres walked casually out of the maze, brushing dust off her uniform and checking her watch. 2 minutes, 14 seconds, she announced to no one in particular. Not bad, but I think I can do better next time. The observation deck had become a scene of complete chaos. Engineers were running calculations on structural damage. The medical staff were treating several cases of nervous collapse. The betting pools had apparently crashed the Academy's financial network. Korvac was rocking back and forth in a corner, muttering something about the rules and how things are supposed to work. Zara had gone completely silver, which in Zephyrians indicated either deep meditation or total system shutdown. The Andromedan delegation was emitting rapid mechanical sounds that their translators couldn't keep up with, but which probably translated to something unprintable. Valk stood frozen at the observation window, staring at the Mika-shaped hole in his supposedly impregnable testing facility. "Nira," he said quietly. "Yes, sir? Make a note in the cadet's file." "What should I write, sir?" Valk was silent for a long moment, watching as maintenance crews swarmed around the breach site and Mika Torres disappeared down the corridor, probably looking for the cafeteria. "Write this," he said finally. "Human Torres, Mika. Survival maze completion time, 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Method, unorthodox. Recommendation, never let her near anything important ever again." He paused, then added, "Also contact engineering. We need to completely redesign the maze." "All of it, sir?" "All of it. And this time, we're hiring human consultants." Outside, the sirens continued to wail, and somewhere in the distance Mika Torres was probably asking someone where she could get a decent cup of coffee. The Galactic Military Academy would never be the same. 23 minutes later, the observation deck still resembled a disaster zone. Half the alien dignitaries were hyperventilating, the other half were demanding explanations, and Valk was staring at the Mika-shaped hole with the vacant expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been fed through a matter disintegrator. "Sir," a maintenance supervisor approached cautiously. "We've completed our preliminary assessment of the structural damage." "And?" Valk asked without looking away from the breach. "Well, sir, the good news is that the hole is perfectly circular and structurally sound. The bad news is that we have absolutely no idea how she did it, and our best engineers are having nervous breakdowns trying to reverse engineer her improvised device." Below them, the Academy's main corridor had become a circus. Maintenance crews swarmed around the breach site with scanners, measuring devices, and increasingly confused expressions. Other cadets who had taken the maze test in previous months were gathering in angry clusters, demanding answers. "Excuse me," a Rigelian cadet pushed through the crowd, his tentacles writhing with indignation. "I spent 4 hours in that maze last semester. 4 hours. Are you telling me I could have just broken the walls?" "The walls are supposed to be unbreakable," replied a Centauri instructor weakly. "Apparently not." The Rigelian shot back. "I want a retake." "Me too," chorused about 30 other voices in various alien languages. Meanwhile, in the Academy's administrative center, a frantic conference was taking place via hologram as officials tried to determine whether Mika had actually broken any rules. Section 7.3 clearly states that cadets must escape the maze, read the Andromedian legal advisor. It does not specify the method of escape. Section 12.8 prohibits destruction of Academy property, countered the Zephyrian disciplinary officer. But Section 15.2 allows for creative problem-solving using available resources, added the Centauri regulations expert. "Were the structural components available resources?" asked the Draconian Ethics Committee chair. Nobody had an answer. Back in the observation deck, the various alien species had begun offering their own theories about what they'd just witnessed. "Clearly humans have some form of undetected telepathic ability that allows them to identify structural weaknesses," declared Professor Thexis, the Academy's leading xenopsychologist. "No other explanation makes sense." "Nonsense," replied Dr. Corvan, head of the engineering department. "They must have some form of natural resonance detection. Probably evolutionary adaptation from living on a seismically active planet." "You're both wrong," interjected Captain Yalara from the Military Strategy Division. "This is obviously advanced training." No species naturally thinks like this without extensive conditioning. Boss, still recording everything, chuckled. Actually, you're all wrong. This is just Tuesday for humans. Tuesday? Several aliens asked simultaneously. It's a human time measurement, Voss explained helpfully. The point is, this isn't special human training or secret abilities. This is just how humans approach problems when they're in a hurry. The revelation that this was considered normal human behavior caused 3 more nervous breakdowns and 1 translator malfunction. At that moment, Mika Torres walked back into the observation area, having apparently found the cafeteria and acquired a cup of something steaming. Hey, she said cheerfully, did I pass? The entire room fell silent. Mika looked around at the stunned faces, then at the hole in the wall, then back at the stunned faces. Was I supposed to leave it intact? She asked, because that wasn't mentioned in the briefing. Valk opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and made a sound like a deflating balloon. Commander, Nira whispered urgently, the insurance company is on line 3. They want to know if the phrase active human is covered under our policy. What did you tell them? Valk asked weakly. I told them I'd get back to them after I finished updating our risk assessment protocols, Nira replied. The new category is labeled humans, assume nothing is impossible. Mika sipped her coffee and waited patiently for someone to answer her question. Valk began, then stopped. He looked at his career, his reputation, his understanding of military engineering, and watched them all crumble like poorly designed walls. You completed the maze in 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Cool, Mika replied. So I passed. The previous record was 25 minutes. Valk continued in a voice of growing hysteria. 25 minutes. You did it in 2. You weren't supposed to be able to do it in 2. Why not? Mika asked, genuinely curious. The briefing said 30 minutes maximum. Multiple solutions available. I found a solution in 2 minutes. Seemed efficient. You destroyed half the facility. Only the parts that were in my way, Mika corrected. And technically, I improved the ventilation system. You should thank me. Korvac, who had been quietly rocking in the corner, suddenly stood up and pointed at Mika with a trembling claw. You, he said in a voice of pure accusation, you don't respect the rules. Mika considered this seriously. I respect rules that make sense, she replied. But if the rules say I can't do something, and physics says I can, I'm going with physics every time. That's not how civilization works, Korvac wailed. It's how humans work, Voss said proudly. Valk stared at Mika Torres, then at the hole in his wall, then at the chaos surrounding him, and came to a profound realization. Everything he thought he knew about military strategy, engineering, and the fundamental nature of problem-solving had just been proven completely wrong by a human with a safety pin and some chewing gum. Nira, he said quietly. Yes, sir? Add another note to her file. What should I write, sir? Valk was quiet for a long moment. Right, Cadet Torres has successfully demonstrated that our definition of impossible needs work. 6 months later, the Galactic Military Academy bore little resemblance to its former self. The entire testing facility had been redesigned from the ground up, with input from a hastily assembled team of human engineering consultants who charged outrageous fees and seemed to find everything hilarious. The new motto, carved in 17 different languages above the Academy's main entrance, read, "If a human can break it, they will break it." Commander Valk stood in his office, looking out at the construction crews still working on what the engineers now called human-resistant architecture. The new maze featured modular components, redundant systems, and walls that were apparently break-proof, according to specifications that made his head hurt. Sir, Nira entered with her daily briefing. Cadet Torres has requested permission to test the new obstacle course. Absolutely not, Valk replied immediately. The construction crews haven't finished installing the backup safety systems. She says she's bored, sir. Valk shuddered. A bored human was apparently even more dangerous than a motivated one. In the past 6 months, Mika had somehow become legendary among the cadet population. Half of them worshipped her as a tactical genius, The other half crossed the corridor when they saw her coming. The betting pools now included categories like how long before Torres breaks something and what will she break next. The current favorite was the Academy's supposedly impregnable vault, followed closely by the physics department's fundamental constants laboratory. Has she submitted her final project proposal yet? Valk asked, dreading the answer. Yes, sir. She wants to improve the Academy's defensive systems by testing them personally. Testing them how? Quote, by seeing how easily I can break in, end quote. Valk made that deflating balloon sound again. It had become his signature response to anything involving Mika Torres. He turned back to the window, watching the construction crews install what looked like blast-resistant barriers around the cafeteria. Apparently, Mika had mentioned that the food distribution system seemed inefficient and they were taking no chances. You know, Nira, he said thoughtfully, I used to believe that military thinking was about working within established parameters, following proven protocols, respecting the boundaries of what's possible. Yes, sir. Humans, he continued, don't just think outside the box. They don't even acknowledge that the box exists. They see a box and immediately start wondering what would happen if they turned it inside out, set it on fire, and used the ashes to build something completely different. That does seem to be their approach, sir. Valk sighed deeply. The truly terrifying part is that it works. Every single time it works. Through the window he could see Mika Torres walking across the courtyard, surrounded by a group of younger cadets who were listening intently to whatever she was explaining. Probably something about creative problem-solving or structural engineering, or how to turn basic physics into a personal weapon. Sir, Nira said quietly, the human consultants have submitted their final report on Academy security. What's their recommendation? Quote, good luck, end quote. They also included an invoice for hazard pay and what appears to be a sympathy card. Valk nodded slowly. Schedule a meeting with the Academy board. We need to discuss expanding our insurance coverage. What category, sir? Acts of human, Valk replied. All of them. Assume the worst, plan for something worse than that, and then triple the budget because humans will find a way to exceed even our worst-case scenarios. As if summoned by his words, a distant alarm began sounding from the direction of the engineering labs. What's that? Valk asked. Nira consulted her comm device. Cadet Torres was helping with a demonstration on quantum mechanics, sir. Was? Past tense, yes, sir. Apparently, she asked too many questions and the professor's equations started producing results that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Valk stared out the window for a long moment, watching smoke rise from the physics building. Nira? What? Yes, sir. Start drafting a letter to Starfleet Command. Recommend that any future human exchange students be assigned to theoretical philosophy or art history. Any particular reason, sir? Valk watched as Mika Torres emerged from the physics building, brushing dust off her uniform and looking satisfied with whatever she'd just accomplished. Because, he said quietly, I have a terrible feeling that breaking our maze was just her warm-up exercise. Somewhere in the distance, another alarm started sounding. The age of humans at the Galactic Military Academy had officially begun, and Commander Valk was already updating his resume.